Could not be getting worse for WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. It just did, because more people was digging up all type of things that she has been doing. Now, we got several things to talk about in this video. We got Cathy selling a percentage. Is it some serious hot water after more information is revealed that she sold a percentage of the WNBA?
The architect of a promised golden age now finds herself at the center of a firestorm that threatens to burn down everything she built. This is a story of WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, the woman who vowed to catapult the league into a billion-dollar empire, but is now facing a credibility crisis so severe it could end her career. Explosive reports have surfaced, alleging she secretly sold off a massive 16% of the entire WNBA in a backroom deal, a move potentially linked to tense player contract negotiations, all without a shred of transparency about where that fortune actually vanished.
That's currently going on got shadowed by the WNBA finals, because all of this information came out right before the game started. And, you know, a lot of people kind of sat on this information and pretty much ignored it.
The very foundation of women's basketball is now shaking. If you want the full, unfiltered story of one of the most dramatic downfalls in sports leadership, you need to see this. Stick around, because what we uncover will change how you see the WNBA forever. And make sure you hit that subscribe button for more real stories you won't hear anywhere else. It all started with quiet whispers in the digital corners of social media, vague rumblings about financial inconsistencies buried deep in league reports. But these whispers were a fuse, and when tenacious journalists from Front Office Sports began digging, they lit a powder keg. Their investigation uncovered a staggering truth. Back in 2022, Cathy Engelbert had orchestrated a massive $75 million capital raise, a move that effectively sold a significant 16% stake of the WNBA to a hand-picked group of outside investors. The league proudly framed this as a transformational investment, a cash infusion destined to turbocharge marketing and boost player salaries. But the fine print told a completely different story. This deal shockingly placed the WNBA's entire valuation at a mere $468 million, a figure that experts immediately called an embarrassing, drastic undervaluation of the entire league.
Was saying that Cathy may not get fired. From what I'm hearing, she is, and this right here just might be the reason why. You know, well, justification. It's the reason why she get fired. Instead, in 2022, she led a $75 million capital raise, selling a 16% stake in the WNBA in what the league said was.
The investigation revealed that this capital raise wasn't a traditional broadcast deal or a public stock offering. It was a private placement, a quiet deal with a select group that included powerful individuals like Ted Leonsis of the Washington Wizards and Monumental Sports, and Joe Tsai, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets. These weren't just neutral parties. They were NBA insiders with their own franchises to protect, leading to immediate questions about conflicting interests. Why were these specific individuals given such a crucial piece of the WNBA? The timing was also highly suspect. This deal was struck just as the league was beginning its meteoric rise in popularity, fueled by a new generation of stars. Yet, at this pivotal moment, Engelbert and her inner circle effectively put a shockingly low price tag on the entire enterprise.
Clear that the stake with an implied valuation of $468 million dramatically undervalued the league, and questions remain about how the $75 million was.
This became glaringly obvious when compared to smaller, brand new startups like Unrivaled, a league founded by stars Breanna, Stewart, and Napheesa Collier, which was securing valuations close to $340 million before it had even hosted a single game. Unrivaled had no legacy, no decade-long broadcast partnerships, and no extensive infrastructure. Its valuation was purely based on future potential and star power. The WNBA, with its 28 years of history, its national TV deals, and its global reach, was valued at only $128 million more. The math simply didn't add up. To financial analysts, it looked less like a strategic investment and more like a liquidation of assets at a bargain bin price. What was supposed to be a strategic masterstroke now looked like a desperate fire sale, a move that permanently locked in a basement-level valuation that would haunt the league for years to come.
NBA stakeholders are divided into three groups. The NBA 30 owners controls 42% of the league. The WNBA owners controls another 42%, and the remaining 50% is owned by investors from capital raise. Owners like Ted, whoever, Joe, whoever, and Herb Simon. That's who currently own the Indiana Fever. All of whom own NBA teams, which WNBA teams and were part of capital raise, now have different stakes in the WNBA. Now, all of this is simply because Cathy decided to sell six.
The moment those numbers hit the internet, the entire WNBA ecosystem erupted. For the players, it was a profound betrayal. These world-class athletes, who had been repeatedly told there simply wasn't enough money in the league to pay them their true worth, were now seeing a huge piece of their league sold off for what many believe was pennies on the dollar.
So it's looking spooky for Cathy and this whole $75 million investment.
The frustration was palpable. How could Engelbert so blatantly undervalue the very product they were risking their bodies for, while simultaneously insisting the funds for better salaries didn't exist? Privately, group chats among players blew up with messages of disbelief and anger. They had sacrificed playing in off-season leagues abroad to make ends meet, all while being told to be patient, that the league's financial breakthrough was just around the corner. Now, they saw that a breakthrough had happened, a $75 million one, and they hadn't seen a dime of its benefits. The narrative of growth for all suddenly felt like a carefully constructed lie. On forums and social media, fan outrage spread like wildfire. Theories began to circulate that this wasn't about growth at all, but about control. The speculation was that by bringing in investors aligned with her inner circle, Engelbert was quietly reshaping the league's power structure, consolidating her own authority, without ever needing the players' approval. This theory gained traction when fans noticed that the league's public statements became more corporate and less player-focused following the capital raise.
Like I stated in the beginning part, a lot of people don't feel like Cathy's going to get fired. I think she's definitely is. Just like I stated, this right here could be grounds to do so. Ben Shea said, "Go be fair. The WNBA landscape has much different in 2022. Now people are chomping at the bit to invest and support." Yes. Now I would say that, but so right now it's looking spooky. Somebody said I had a theory days ago, and my first paragraphs made me wonder about how things went from that to this.
The marketing push that was promised seemed to fizzle out, with many fans complaining that it was still nearly impossible to watch their favorite teams due to restricted broadcast deals and a clunky streaming service. The trust was broken, and the stage was set for an internal civil war. The players, who were the league's most powerful marketing asset, began to feel like disposable pawns in a much larger financial game. This sense of betrayal created a unified front among the athletes, a solidarity that would soon transform from quiet grumbling into a deafening roar during the next round of collective bargaining. The league soul was fractured, and the crack between the front office and the players was widening into a chasm. But the problem went far deeper than just hurt feelings and a questionable valuation. This sale fundamentally altered the very DNA of who owned the WNBA. The league's ownership map was suddenly an incredibly complex maze of conflicting interests. Before the sale, it was simpler. The NBA's 30-team owners controlled about 42%, and the individual WNBA franchise owners held another 42%. But that crucial remaining 16%, now owned by Engelbert's new investor group, changed everything. This wasn't just a passive investment. It was a purchase of immense influence. This new power block, which included heavyweights in the NBA world, now had a coveted seat at the table for every critical decision, from future media deals to the core of league governance. Engelbert found herself hopelessly stuck between three factions with wildly different priorities: the NBA's corporate brand protection, the team owners' desire for autonomy, and the new investors' relentless pressure for immediate profit. For example, when it came to negotiating a new TV rights deal, the NBA owners might prioritize long-term partnerships with their existing broadcast partners. The individual WNBA team owners would want a deal that maximized their local revenue and visibility. Meanwhile, the new investor group, looking for a quick return on their $75 million bet, might push for the highest possible cash offer, even if it meant partnering with a streaming service that had a smaller audience. Behind closed doors, board meetings became tense and deeply divided. Some longtime owners felt completely sidelined, with one allegedly calling to move a hostile takeover wearing lipstick. The presence of these new voices created a scenario where the league's competitive integrity could be questioned. What if an investor with a stake in the league overall also had ties to a specific WNBA franchise? Could that influence decisions on draft rules, revenue sharing, or even officiating? For the players, This ownership confusion meant that every conversation about revenue sharing turned into a grueling battle with a ghost, as no one could agree on who even had the final authority. The simple question of who's in charge no longer had a simple answer. As executives argued over charts and percentages, the players reached their absolute limit. The ongoing collective bargaining agreement talks swiftly transformed from routine negotiations into a hostile battlefield. Behind closed doors, union representatives accused Engelbert's team of using that $75 million raise as leverage to stall progress on salaries. The commissioner's office reportedly insisted the league still wasn't profitable enough to justify higher pay, pointing to that very same $468 million valuation as proof. But this explanation was insulting to the players. They knew the league's audience was growing. New sponsors were coming in, and expansion slots were being sold for $250 million each. The Las Vegas franchise sale and the new Golden State Valkyries team were clear indicators of soaring market value that contradicted the league's official, deflated valuation. So where was the money going? They demanded full financial transparency, including a detailed accounting of the $75 million. They wanted to see the receipts for the transformational marketing and infrastructure upgrades they were promised. Engelbert's office refused, citing confidential investor agreements. That phrase alone, confidential investor agreements, became a rallying cry for the furious athletes. It was the ultimate symbol of the corporate wall being erected between them and the truth. In response, veteran stars began issuing stark warnings of potential lockout, while younger players spoke openly on podcasts about a broken system. This wasn't just about salary anymore. It was about respect and a fundamental right to understand the business they were building. The movement was unifying, and hashtags like WNBA Revolt started trending globally. Players from different teams, who were usually competitors on the court, now stood together in solidarity. The unthinkable, a complete work stoppage, suddenly seemed like a very real possibility. The players were no longer asking. They were demanding a seat at the table, and they were prepared to flip the entire table over if they were ignored once again. Just when it seemed the situation couldn't get any worse for Cathy Engelbert, the dam finally broke. An internal memo was leaked to the press, and its contents were more damaging than anyone could have imagined. The document shockingly suggested that significant portions of the $75 million had been diverted to vague consulting initiatives and brand partnerships that yielded almost no tangible return. The memo pointed to multi-million-dollar payments to obscure growth strategy firms and six-figure sums spent on focus groups to tell the league what the players had been saying for free, that they needed more promotion. Insiders scathingly referred to it as throwing money into smoke. Overnight, social media exploded with hashtags like "Where did the 75 go?" The narrative had completely flipped. The woman once celebrated as a savvy business leader was now the face of corporate mismanagement. This leak had a chilling effect on the very investors Engelbert had brought in. Reports surfaced that some were already pulling back from future funding rounds, fearing the instability from the player relations chaos had severely damaged the WNBA's reputation with crucial sponsors. Major corporate partners who had signed on to support women's empowerment were now getting nervous, questioning whether their money was being used effectively or simply disappearing into a black hole of administrative overhead. The pressure was now coming from all sides. Players, empowered by the leak, began quietly exploring options in rival leagues and overseas, using them as powerful leverage. Superstars like Aya Wilson and Breanna Stewart started being more vocal in interviews, subtly hinting that their long-term future depended on the league, making serious structural changes. Engelbert's grip on the league was slipping through her fingers, and the entire organization was teetering on the brink. The secret was out, the money was unaccounted for, and the only thing left was the inevitable, very public collapse. All the brewing tension, the secret deals, and the broken trust culminated on the league's biggest stage, the WNBA Finals. The arena was electric, a sold-out cathedral of basketball buzzing with the energy of the season that had captured the world's attention. On the surface, it was a celebration of the sport's peak, the dazzling athleticism, the record-breaking viewership, the undeniable proof that women's basketball was not just a niche but a powerhouse. But beneath the cheers for the champions, a different, darker current was flowing through the crowd. It was a collective memory of every underpaid player, every hidden financial report, and every evasive answer from the league's top office. As the final seconds ticked away and confetti cannons prepared to fire, a palpable sense of anticipation, mixed with dread, settled over the knowledgeable fans. They knew what was coming next. When the buzzer sounded and the on-court celebrations began, the focus was rightly on the athletes, sweaty, exhausted, and triumphant, embodying the very excellence the league was built upon. They hugged, they cried, they celebrated a hard-fought victory that represented a lifetime of work. But in the orchestrated pageantry of a modern sports final, there is a script, and the next scene called for the commissioner. Cathy Engelbert, dressed in a crisp suit, the picture of corporate authority, stepped out of the shadow of the stands and onto the polished hardwood. Her walk to the center of the court must have felt like a mile. Later, insiders would claim her team had discussed this moment, aware that the sentiment was negative, but they had dismissed the idea of a significant vocal backlash. They believed the glory of the championship would overshadow the simmering discontent. This was a catastrophic miscalculation. The first sound wasn't a unified roar, it was a wave. It started as a low, rumbling groan from one section, then was instantly picked up and amplified by another, and then another, until within seconds it coalesced into a deafening, unmistakable, and sustained storm of boos. It wasn't a brief spurt of displeasure. It was a relentless wall of sound that seemed to physically push back against confetti drifting from the rafters. The sound was so overwhelming, so visceral, it completely drowned out the arena's celebratory music. The television broadcast team, caught off guard, stumbled over their commentary, their words becoming hesitant and uncomfortable. Camera operators, trained to capture joy, frantically pan away from Engelbert's face, switching to tight shots of players who were now looking around. Their expressions a complex mix of victory smile and awkward unease. You could see it in their eyes. They heard it, they understood it, and for many, it was a validation of their own private frustrations. The players were stuck in an impossible position. This was their moment of triumph. Yet the person presenting them with the ultimate symbol of their success was being publicly eviscerated by the very people who supported them most. For Engelbert, standing at the microphone, the plastic smile frozen on her face. The moment must have been utterly isolating. The teleprompter scrolled with the usual platitudes. Historic season, incredible athletes, bright future. But every word she spoke was met with that same wall of sound. This was more than a protest. It was a collective scream of betrayal. These fans weren't casual observers. They were the ones who bought the jerseys, who fought for league pass access, who passionately defended the WNBA in online debates. They were the ones who saw their favorite players having to go overseas every winter to make a living wage, while reading reports about a secret $75 million deal. They were the ones who followed the cryptic social media posts from stars hinting at front office problems. In that unified boo, they were voicing every unanswered question, every dismissed concern, every promise that felt broken. It was a raw, democratic expression of lost confidence. This wasn't just about a lost game. It was a public execution of a leader's credibility. The viral afterlife of the clip was even more brutal. Within minutes, it was splashed across social media, cut and edited for maximum impact. The juxtaposition was jarring. The visual of a championship celebration paired with a soundtrack of utter rejection. Memes were created within the hour. One popular clip placed a sarcastic cricket sound effect over her speech. Another superimposed text over her face. Me wondering where the $75 million went. Hashtags like hashtag Boogate and hashtag Engelbert out started trending globally. Sports talk shows, which had often ignored the WNBA's internal politics, were now forced to lead with the story. The analysis was relentless. Former players, now working as commentators, were asked to weigh in. Some were diplomatically critical, speaking of a disconnect between the league and its fans. Others were more direct, calling it a long time coming and a necessary moment of truth. The incident became a cultural touchstone, a shorthand for a leader who had catastrophically lost the room. It was discussed not just in sports circles, but in business publications as a case study in failed leadership and the perils of losing stakeholder trust. Behind the scenes, the fallout was immediate and severe. Sources close to the league's board of governors described an emergency conference called the very next morning. The tone was said to be one of panic and fury. Owners who had previously supported Engelbert, or at least remained silent, were now apoplectic. Their brands, their franchises, their multi-million-dollar investments were now publicly associated with this chaotic, ugly scene. The championship, which should have been a week-long marketing bonanza, was completely overshadowed. The narrative was no longer about the incredible athletes or the thrilling games. It was about the league's implosion. Sponsors, always skittish about negative controversy, were reportedly making frantic calls to their league contacts, seeking assurances and answers that no one seemed able to provide. The single greatest night of the WNBA year had been transformed into its lowest, most publicly humiliating point. The furious rejection from the stands perfectly mirrored the betrayal the players felt in their locker rooms. In the days that followed, though no active player came out and explicitly praised the boos, the silence was deafening. Like tweets, subtle Instagram stories with telling lyrics, and off-the-record comments to journalists made their position clear. The fans had done what the players could not do without facing fines or reprisals. They had spoken the raw, unfiltered truth. The relationship between the commissioner and the players was now irreparably broken. How could they sit across a bargaining table from someone who had been so resoundingly rejected by the lifeblood of the sport? The boos stripped away the last vestiges of her authority, revealing a leader with no moral or popular standing left. It was a clear, undeniable signal that the credibility of her leadership had hit zero. The trophy presentation, meant to be a symbol of culmination and power, instead became the symbol of its utter evaporation. The question was no longer if change was coming, but how seismic the shift would be, and what scars would remain on the league long after the echoes of those boos finally faded. Cathy Engelbert's downfall is a traumatic case study in how ambition, without transparency, can lead to total collapse. What began as a bold promise to build a billion-dollar legacy has ended in a saga of hidden deals, player revolts, and profound loss of trust. That $75 million sale, intended to secure the league's future, instead exposed its deepest weaknesses, dividing owners, alienating players, and pushing sponsors toward the exits. The very investors she brought in to validate her strategy are now likely questioning their decision, looking at the public relations nightmare and wondering if their investment is secure. The league's brand, once associated with empowerment and progress, is now dangerously linked with secrecy and corporate mismanagement. This isn't just a bad news cycle. It's a fundamental fracture in the league's identity, one that could take years to heal if it ever fully does. Now, with the NBA's Adam Silver reportedly forced to step in, the WNBA stands at a critical crossroads. Silver's involvement signals that the crisis has escalated beyond the WNBA office and is now a top-tier priority for the entire basketball world. The burning question is no longer about whether Engelbert will survive the storm. That outcome seems all but decided. The real, haunting question is whether the WNBA itself can ever truly recover from the immense damage left in her wake. The path forward is fraught with challenges. The next commissioner will inherit a league with a deeply suspicious player base, a fractured ownership group, and a fan base that has learned to scrutinize every financial decision. Rebuilding trust will require radical transparency, perhaps even opening the books to the players' union to prove there are no more hidden skeletons. It will require a genuine partnership with the athletes, treating them not as employees, but as essential stakeholders in the league's growth. The alternative is unthinkable, a permanent erosion of faith, where every success is met with cynicism and every failure is magnified by the memory of the scandal. This turbulent era will forever be remembered, but the final chapter hasn't been written. It could be remembered as a painful but necessary low point that forced the league to finally build a more honest and sustainable foundation. Or it could be the moment the league's bright future began to collapse under the weight of its own secrets. The power now doesn't just lie with the owners in a boardroom. It lies with everyone who cares about the game. What do you think should happen next? Should the players take a stand and demand a direct say in choosing the next commissioner? Is there a former player who could step in and lead with the credibility the situation desperately needs? Or does the league need a complete external audit to restore confidence? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. The conversation itself is part of the recovery. If you found this deep dive into the WNBA's secret crisis revealing, if you believe in holding leadership accountable, then show your support by smashing that like button and subscribing for more content that goes beyond the headlines. Your engagement helps ensure stories like this are told. Thanks for watching.